about what's going on with a flight, be it FBOs, ground transportation providers, or even dispatchers, admins, and spouses. So we've got FlightAware providing premium data to the big-time airlines. We've got FlightAware providing these premium web tools to big-time business aviation flight departments. And we got to asking ourselves at FlightAware, what about us bug smasher guys? There's a large group of us at FlightAware that fly single-engine, multi-engine, piston aircraft. And FlightAware doesn't really have anything for us. You know, we can't all be like Matt Thurber from AIN flying around in these big fancy business jets, right? We're more like Paul Bertorelli from AvWeb bouncing around VFR at 5,500 feet, maybe sniffing a little bit of avgas along the way, right? And by the way, if Paul's here, you know, that's an awesome job. I really wish I could get you paid to fly that way. Sniffing avgas, that is not the awesome part of the job. But anyway, so we got to asking ourselves, what do we need to have for the general aviation pilot at FlightAware? Is there anything for us? And of course, there is, and that's what we want to introduce here today. We're talking about Aviator, which is our premium web and mobile tools for GA pilots designed by FlightAware general aviation pilots. I should mention that about 30% of our staff at FlightAware, engineers, sales, all the way up to the executives, are pilots. So we really have it in our blood. So those premium tools that we're providing for the commercial aircraft operator, for the business jet operator, we're introducing those into Aviator so that they can benefit from the same platform that have many of those same premium features that those big, fancy flight departments get to benefit from themselves. All right. So there's three big value propositions that I would like to talk about today for Aviator. The first is seamless communication. Aviator is going to enable faster and clearer communication with all of your stakeholders. The second is a comprehensive digital flight history. Aviator is going to become the place for reliving all of your memorable flying experiences. And then third, a unified dashboard. GA pilots need a one-stop shop to get all of the interesting and helpful facts about their flight. Aviator is going to be the tool for that job. All right, so let's dig into this first value proposition, seamless communication. Right, it's not just you as the GA pilot that makes a flight successful, right? It's all of the other stakeholders along the journey that are coordinating actions based on the information that you give them. And that makes the experience of your flight better. We can all relate to this. This is the family member that's picking you up at the FBO who needs to know what time you're actually going to be arriving. Or maybe it's a flying club coordinator who knows and understands why you're going to have the airplane back a little bit later than usual because you had to divert from weather. So imagine keeping everyone that's important to you informed from the moment that you decide to go flying in a way that's simple, seamless, fast, and digital. Aviator is for you, the GA pilot, but it's also about looping in your friends, family, business partners, bosses, flying club members, flight school dispatchers, and Aviator is the easiest way to make that happen. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how to do that. What is the easiest way to loop in all of these different stakeholders? Well, the very first thing that you do is you enroll your stakeholders into your Aviator account for them to receive FlightAware's flight alerts. All right, so what are flight alerts? Flight alerts are push messages via text, email, or through the iOS app that go out to all of your stakeholders whenever there is something interesting that's happening with your flight. And you can loop in up to 25 people from your Aviator subscription. All right, so let's see how this works. Let's go flying. All right, congratulations. You've actually found some time in your schedule to be able to go fly. Okay? Let's see if we can get this animation to work here. There we go. So you found some time in your schedule to go flying. And you know where you're leaving from, you know where you're going to go, you know approximately how long it's going to take you to get there. And so that is the first place that we are sending out this information out to your stakeholders. Now, we need to be able to get this information into the FlightAware system. There's two different ways that you can do that. First, file an IFR flight plan. Everyone's familiar with that. And FlightAware is tied into all the major air navigation service providers like the FAA and Eurocontrol, and we're able to scrape that intent information and put it into the FlightAware system so that you can loop in your stakeholders about your intent to go flying. Now, we know that there's a lot of VFR flyers out there as well, and maybe they don't even file or get flight following, and we have a special way for them to input their flight intent information into the FlightAware system, and we'll show you that here in just a moment. All right, so you filed your flight plan or your flight intent information, and you're sitting in the aircraft, you've pre-flighted it, and everything is looking good, you're good to go. You fire up the engine, check your engine instruments, your oil pressure is good, your fuel oil temperature is coming up, and you turn on the avionics. This is a major step forward in the progression of your flight. We're actually able to independently detect through FlightAware's terrestrial ADS-B receivers that initial message coming from the transponder of your aircraft. And so we're able to take that and deliver that to all the stakeholders, the people that you think are important relating to your flight, and deliver that information to them. Okay, now you've gotten the weather and you've gotten your taxi clearance. It's time for you to start taxiing out to the runway. So you add just a little bit of throttle, you're ready to go, and those wheels start to turn. And FlightAware, through its independent ADS-B receiver network, is able to detect that initial movement of your aircraft. This is another good sign that you're progressing forward in your flight. And so you've started to taxi. And that taxi start message is another message that we send out to all the stakeholders. Things are progressing and your stakeholders are in the know. All right, now you're at the end of the runway. You've done your run up and everything is looking good. You call a tower and you get your takeoff clearance from them. Taxi out onto the runway, line it up right down the middle, apply full throttle, all your engine instruments look great, and you rotate at VR, add a little bit of right rudder to keep it going straight, climb out at VX, gear up, and then transitioning to VY. You're now in flight. This is the really, really good part of the day that you had planned, right? So FlightAware, again, through its independent network of ADS-B receivers, senses that you've entered into this new phase of your flight, and we send that message out to all of your stakeholders. Now, if you're like me, you show up to the airport late. You know, you've run into hassles at home or traffic on the way to the airport, and what you have created as your initial time of departure doesn't often match that. I had run into that problem all the time. FlightAware is actually able to detect this change in your departure time, this actual departure time from your intended departure time, and we update your new estimated time of arrival for all of your stakeholders. So this is a really, really good way to proactively keep them in the loop. All right, you're flying along, and now you're getting close to your destination. You're 40 minutes out or so. FlightAware is able to calculate that ETA on a dynamic basis based on how you're maneuvering the airplane around, and we're going to send that signal again out to all of your stakeholders on your Aviator account. All right, it's time for landing. You've done your pre-landing checklist. Your gear is down. Your gas is set to the fullest tank. Your mixture is all the way in, and your prop is all the way in, and your wheels are now firmly planted on the runway. Again, send out an independent base message from FlightAware's ADS-B receivers to your stakeholders, letting them know that this important phase of your flight has been completed. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a mom like I do who is worried about every single flight you go on and asks every time for a phone call. Hey, please let me know that you've arrived safely. This is a really, really important message. This is something that they're going to want to see. All right, and finally, the last phase of flight, you move over to ground 121 something, and you get your taxi clearance to the FBO. FlightAware is able to observe your taxi to the FBO and know when you've arrived at the FBO, park your aircraft, and shut it down. The final phase of your flight is complete. We again inform all of your stakeholders that you've safely completed your flight. All right, so we talked a little bit about the VFR flyer, right? They're not filing flight plans. So how do we know where they are going? That's been a big problem where you look on some flight tracking platforms, there's no intent information there at all. They're just kind of flying around. And that can be a lot of fun, but there's a lot of stakeholders relating to that flight going, I wonder where that aircraft is going, and I wonder how I can get more of that information. We offer an ability for VFR flyers to enter in their flight intent information into Aviator. So this is an opportunity for you to say your intentions. It's a way for you to harness the most power out of these flight alerts that I just walked you through. So it's almost like filing a flight plan, but it's not filing a flight plan in the FAA. But you're telling FlightAware where you're leaving from, where you intend to go. It's a great sound, by the way. Where you intend to go, how you intend to get there, and approximately how long it will take you to get there. And as soon as you enter in that intent information as a VFR flyer, we'll pass that on to all of your stakeholders with those flight alerts that we just showed. All right. So have you all ever had the experience of rolling into an airport, pulling into the FBO, and they act like they don't know you're coming? You know why that is? It's because they don't know you're coming. That's the issue, and that's especially true if you're a VFR flyer. They have no digital signal of your intent to either utilize their airport or even utilize their FBO. So through Aviator, not only can you signal your intent to use a particular airport, but if you fly into a big airport like Houston Hobby, where they have 6 different FBOs, you can actually select the FBO that you intend to use and pass that digital information onto the FBO. They use a special tool from FlightAware. It's called FBO Toolbox. Thousands of FBOs around the world utilize this. And so they get this digital signal that goes to them. It's discrete. They're the only ones that know that you intend to use that FBO. So the good news is, now we as a VFR flyer, we're going to start feeling more like Matt Thurber, flying in our Gulfstream. When we pull up to the FBO, things are going to be ready. That rental car is going to be pulled out, and everything is going to be ready to go. All right. So we've all flown the airlines before. We've walked into the airline terminal, and we see the big flight information display boards. And we have the departure board and then another board that shows all the arrival information. A lot of that arrival information is actually powered by FlightAware. And that's the same data that's being used within the airline operations center. This is the same artificial intelligence predictive technology that's driving calculations for the ETAs for those big airline flights. And now that's being harnessed within Aviator. All right, so here's how that works. You've done your flight planning, right? You've used one of the big flight planning tools, or maybe you did a time and distance calculation to get your estimated time of arrival. But we know that those ETAs aren't always correct, right? You've got holding on the ground, or you're being shuffled around by ATC for traffic. Maybe you've had to deviate for weather. And all of those different things can change the most carefully planned pre-flight ETA that's been calculated. So FlightAware is able to independently detect and calculate new changes to your ETA, and then seamlessly integrate those into the Aviator platform and distribute those new times to all of your stakeholders. So Aviator users and all of the people that you think are important to your flight are going to be able to benefit from these revolutionary FlightAware foresight times. These are the most accurate calculated ETAs available anywhere. More accurate than your flight planning system, the GPS on your aircraft, or even times that are being generated by the air navigation service providers like the FAA themselves. And these were previously only offered to the airlines and business aircraft operators, but now they're available to you as a general aviation pilot. Okay, so we've all been flying and we've had to divert for some reason. A lot of us have to divert for weather occasionally, especially if you're flying in the south like we do. Or maybe you're like me, you've got a 7-year-old daughter in the back and you're 30 minutes into your 3-hour flight that you planned out beautifully and she has to go to the bathroom right now. So you got to divert and go to a different airport than the one that you had originally intended. Because we know what your intent was through that IFR flight plan or that VFR intentions tool that you've used, and that we're able to also independently observe that you've landed somewhere other than your originally intended destination, we know that a diversion has occurred. So your stakeholders are going to be very, very interested in that information. They know you're going to be late because of that diversion, but they also know that they don't need to worry. All right, let's talk a little bit about the second value proposition of FlightAware Aviator, the flight history. GA pilots need a way to go back and review and remember, maybe sometimes even reminisce a little bit about their flight. Aviator is going to be able to help them accomplish that. So with Aviator, you're going to have access to all of the comprehensive flight history and details of your flight where you can review and relive them at any time. And this isn't just the wins and wheres of the flight, there's a lot of other little details that we're capturing here. Also, I should mention, this isn't just for one aircraft that you're flying. If you're like me, I don't own an airplane, but I rent. So there's 2, 3, 4 different airplanes that I fly on an occasional basis. In your one Aviator account, you're going to be able to add all of those aircraft into your account. So there's 2 ways that you're going to be able to access this historical information. The first is these monthly automatic reports that will be sent out to you via email. This is really the wins and wheres and how longs of flights that you've made. So this is going to be great for record keeping and maintenance purposes, tax records, maybe reconciling your logbook. If you're a flight school, you can have a detailed historical record of all of your flights. But through the website, we also give you an opportunity to interact with your flights in a way that you can really relive and recreate all of the details of that flight that makes it so much more interesting, meaningful, and detailed. It reminds me of this old Sporty's training video that featured the late great Richard Collins. And he was encouraging new flight students to be very descriptive in their logbooks, writing down all the little details of not only when and where they went and how long it took, but who was on the airplane with them and why they were going on this trip. Because he recognized that flying these trips wasn't just about getting to the destination. We're flying these airplanes because it's cool and fun, and we really, really enjoy that journey. And that's really what Aviator is about, is capturing those little details that make reliving that journey that we've taken so much richer for us. So if you're a flight student or you're reminiscing about your flight training days, you can go back and look at your VFR turns around a point within Aviator. Or maybe you're really proud of that ILS that you just shot, and you can see how well you tracked that localizer beam into you. All right, here's my good buddy, Mr. James Hartman. He's got a flight going from somewhere in the middle of Louisiana over to David Wayne Hooks. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but so James is our product manager for the Aviator product. He's a general aviation pilot, Cherokee 180 owner, working on his CFI right now. And this is a flight that he took from Louisiana over to David Wayne Hooks. It was supposed to be a nice, easy flight, basically straight heading of 270. But when he took off, he ran into a little bit of weather there, and he had to make a big diversion up to the north and pick his way through a little bit of weather to get to his destination. This was a really nice flight by James. By the way, James doesn't have thousands of hours. This isn't something that he's done a lot of before in the past. So this is a really special, important flight for him where he made some really, really good decisions that got him to his destination safely. So he's going to be able to go back to Aviator and really relive the details of this flight. Oh, by the way, I should mention that when he made that big deviation to the north, FlightAware was able to independently detect that move and recalculate his estimated time of arrival into hooks and then pass that information on to all the stakeholders who are tied into his Aviator account.
Sorry to interrupt the question, but you're actually, at what point in the flight does that radar image use? Because if you took up 2 hours to make that flight, the radar is stable. So where in the flight?
Yeah, that's a great question. This is at the midpoint of the flight itself. So that's a static image. Part of our product development plan is to make this weather imagery dynamic for the replays. Yes. Yeah, we're working on that as we speak. That would be an innovation introduced into Aviator at no additional charge, which is generally our philosophy at FlightAware. We create a product, we just continue to make it better and better and offer these new features to you. Thanks for the question. All right, so we saw James's flight in the air, but we also can see his flights on the ground. So this is a taxi sequence that he made at Ellington Field, where you can see very clearly that he was leaving the Houston Ellington Field parking complex, making his way down the taxiway for a departure off to the north. Okay, last value proposition, a unified dashboard. GA pilots need a one-stop shop to get all the interesting and helpful facts about their flight. Aviator is their go-to hub for flight details. All right, so we can walk through a little bit of some of the interesting information that's captured on this particular flight. And this is stuff that you're not going to see on the free version of FlightAware. So we can see for James flying from Ellington Field to David Wayne Hooks that he departed from the city of Houston parking area. That he taxied all the way, not just to David Wayne Hooks, but actually we show the detail of where he taxied his aircraft to the T hangars at that airport. Moving down just a little bit, we actually see the time that he began to taxi out. And the time that he took off, so you can do a little bit of quick math there and see how long it took for him to actually accomplish his taxi. Landing times are encoded here, as well as the amount of time it took to taxi into the final parking spot for the aircraft. Capturing the runway that he took off from, and the runway that he landed on, and also enshrined within Aviator is the weather at the airport of origin and the destination weather. Here's a really cool feature that's actually kind of hidden within FlightAware. This is what we call the track log report. So you can actually see all of the positions that make up a flight that we show on our webpage and on the mobile app itself. And related to all of those, we also have swap codes. So you can see how your swap codes changed over the course of the flight. So you went from 1200, then you picked up flight following, they had you enter in a new swap code. We're going to capture all of that here. Also, you see highlighted in green, it's a little bit difficult to see. We have autopilot settings in here. This is really neat. So you can see that there's autopilot settings based on what was entered into the heading for the autopilot, as well as altitude settings in here as well. So if you have any modern digital autopilot, like a GFC 500, we're capturing these details and including that into Aviator. All right, so this hub of details isn't static. You're also able to sort of relive all these details in different map layers that we make available to you as well. Of course, we have the classic FlightAware blue that everybody knows about, but we're also providing VFR sectionals, as well as low and high route IFR maps. Of course, we have an Earth view, so if you fly over some interesting geographic feature, you're going to be able to really zoom in to to see exactly what it was that you were looking at. And we also have a lot of premium weather information in here as well. We have weather information from DTN, the radar information there. So it's a lot more insightful and granular than what you're normally able to access just through the free weather database. All right, so we can see that Aviator is a great tool you can use all the way from the time that you begin a flight, start thinking about going in flight, wanting to loop in all of your stakeholders, to years later after you've completed the flight and you're wanting to reminisce. All right, so who is Aviator for? It's for any GA pilot. If you're operating a single engine or multi-engine piston aircraft, Aviator is for you. Whether you're an owner and operator, if you're a renter, if you're a flight student, if you're a seasoned professional, you're going to be able to benefit from Aviator. All right. So, take just a quick break, and you guys can see some of these quotes that we have from people who are already utilizing this tool. I believe everything that we've shown you thus far is part of the standard package, yes, sir.
Are there notifications from vehicles, like which ones they say, which ones
That is correct, yes. And for some more information on that, we've got some product sheets up here at the front if you'd like to take a look.
Thank you for the question.
Okay.
You don't have to answer the one. You host this on the cloud?
This is hosted on FlightAware's private cloud. These are servers that we own and operate ourselves. Yes, this is our system.
So, two unrelated questions. Both are questions that were related by integrations. So, are you looking for integrating with engine monitors so that you can actually start to see the relationship between how this engine set, course, and what the plane is doing with what we're tracking? And somewhat integrated. My question is, you know, you're less than a step away from turning this into a full-out logbook.
Sure.
Is that where you're going, probably?
Yeah, you can see different paths that this tool could evolve. Although, you know what, we think there's some really good logbook providers out there today. I don't know that we necessarily have any designs in our product to do that, but you can see how we've created some options for ourselves in that direction. As it relates to, you know, the engine monitoring question, we are always very interested in doing integrations with FlightAware data with people who create these other tools that are adding a lot of value in the aviation industry. So we're very happy to have discussions about exporting that data into those types of tools if the users of the Aviator account opt into that type of integration.